with today with our speakers online and in live as well. We will have some interesting views and experiences to share as well with you, since you're coming from all different countries. I think EU funds are a really interesting topic to speak about and share good and bad practices. Yeah, feel free to take notes. As Istok said before, be active, think about your questions, which will follow on after the main part of the session. So we have more or less 2 hours. I ask all the speakers to take their time and to take care of as well that every speaker can have time to share their opinion. So today I'm very happy to welcome here on the stage Ms. Lidia Dimova. She's member of the Parliament of the Republic of Macedonia for the Social Democratic Union of Macedonia. Ms. Dimova is president of the National Council for European Integration within the Parliament and vice president of the Parliamentary Stabilization and Association Committee. Previously, she worked as executive director of the famous think tank Macedonian Center for European Training, and her field of expertise are European funds and enlargement financial instruments. So via Skype, then, we will have a connection to Brussels and as well Croatia at the same time, because Mr. Hrvoje Butigan works in Brussels, but he's Croatian. He's a representative of Dubrovnik and Neretva region. Probably you know about Dubrovnik, Croatian region in the south. His everyday work includes intensive cooperation with EU institutions, promoting interest and touristic potential of the region, and as well many activities of European network and associations. He will present some successful projects regarding youth that are financed from the EU programs. Later on, we will have as well 2 more participants from our audience, which will present 2 researches in their own countries and in the southeastern European area. And so now we can start with Skype first. So I hope we will be able to hear Mr. Hrvoje Butigan, who will talk about youth policies. Hrvoje, do we hear you?
Thank you, Jasmina. Hello, everyone. Brussels calling. Thank you for inviting me to be a speaker. I want to welcome all the participants of this conference, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to get to know in the next 1 hour. So first, I want to represent my work in Brussels office. So in 2010, Dubrovnik-Neretva region has, in cooperation with Regional Development Agency, established a representative office in Brussels. So our office has been actively engaged into the county promotion in the center of the European Union. So as we wanted better contacts with the European Union institutions in Brussels and cooperation with other European regions. Through the Brussels representative office, the cooperation with 3 other Croatian counties also has been established, and we are the first contact point for our citizens and youth, and also for the EU institutions and other regions. So our main activities are to promote economic, cultural and touristic potentials of the region. We also provide information about the possibilities of investment. So we follow and actively participate in the activities of European institutions. We participate in the activities of European networks and association with the goal of exchanging experience and also the good practices. We represent the interest of our region and inform institutions and citizens of the region about the current European programs, and present also the project ideas and promote successful projects with other European regions and institutions. We also provide the institutional support, offering an expert help and supplying partners for projects that are financed from EU programs available for Croatia. The networks are most important here in Brussels. So we established the Croatian Business Network and also participate in the networks for tourism, rural development, agriculture, research, innovation, and health. And I can say the aim of this inclusion and participation of the work of these thematic partnership networks is to improve particular sectors and also to meet European regulations, good practices, and to create partnerships with other regions, and also to create, implement, and for joint development projects. In addition to multilateral cooperation with international organizations in Brussels, our office has developed a relation on multilateral level with the EU regions and cities and municipalities, as well as with other partner countries. We have cooperation with Belgian organizations that have shown interest in establishing the contacts with the region, cooperation on joint projects, and transfer of knowledge in entrepreneurship. Cooperation with Polish regions about the transfer of knowledge on the use of EU structural funds. And also we have cooperation with the Italian region, with whom cooperation agreement also has been signed. About the projects, our priorities, we have two projects that for the next period, for 2014-2020. So it is Dubrovnik Airport. It is the 3 million euro project. It is one of the 4 projects for the Juncker investment plan. The tender for the also 300 million euro Pelješac Bridge is Croatia is expected to issue towards the end of this year, and construction could begin next spring. Feasibility study also has concluded that our bridge is the best way to connect the southernmost part of Croatia with the rest of the country. And the government expects that the European Union will financial support both projects with a maximum 85%. We also provide internships. We organize internship for young people from our region with opportunities for exchanging knowledge and experiences with other regions and institutions. We have good cooperation with the University of Dubrovnik. We have American College of Management and also International Diplomacy University. I can show the example of the best practices for the youth. We have a project, Youth and Brussels Base. It is a project of 4 European regions. Dubrovnik Neretva from Croatia. We have Krusevo from Italy. Lubuski from Poland. And also Prešov from Slovakia. The project was approved by the European Commission, and it is funded by the Youth in Action program. So the project aims to send 80 youngsters from the regions, Brussels, in the time of 24 months. It aims to give young people of those 4 regions a unique non-formal education opportunity. And the project started last year, on 1st of May. And we have 2 youth in action activities. It is European Volunteer Service and Transnational Youth Exchange. Through the European Volunteer Service, the young unemployed people in the age of 18 to 30 years who will make use of this unique training offer, they have the opportunity to integrate into the local community, meeting with other young people, socializing and participating in leisure activities. About the Transnational Youth Exchange, the group of young people, also which is from unemployed students between 18 and 25 years, learn from their peers about the different backgrounds, also cultures and interests. They learn how to their needs and interests can be concretely addressed through the participation of their local community and environment in the EU policy making. The results of these projects are young people who understand the importance of more inclusive growth, with special regard to youth unemployment and in general of more active participation in society. Also, the co-regions improve capacity building and non-formal education system and best practices exchange and exploitation capabilities. I also want to speak about how the EU funds opportunities for youth, as the EU Commission makes a direct financial contribution in the form of grants and in support of projects of organizations which further the interests of the EU, also contribute to the implementation of EU program or policy. So an interest party can apply by responding to calls for proposals. Erasmus Plus aims to strengthen the quality of youth work and also the non-formal learning for young people in Europe. So it provides opportunities for young people to experience learning mobility in Europe and beyond, and for youth workers to develop their interpersonal skills and improve their employment prospects through training and also the networking opportunities in Europe and beyond. Between 2014 and 2020, the program will provide opportunities for over 4 million Europeans to study, train, gain work experience, and also the volunteer role. The opportunities for young people to participate in the activities abroad, including youth exchange and also the volunteer service. Opportunities for youth workers to take part in activities abroad, including training and also the networking events and also job shadowings. The lifelong learning program was designed to enable people at any stage of their life to take part in stimulating in learning experiences and as well as developing education and training across Europe. The Youth Guarantee is a new approach to tackling youth unemployment, which ensures that all young people under 25 register with employment services or not, get a good quality and concrete offer within 4 months of them leaving formal education or becoming unemployed. The good quality offer should be for job, traineeship or continuing education, and also be adapted to each individual and need and situation. Let's say that Finland has developed a youth guarantee scheme. The Eurofund Evaluation Fund that's in 2011, 85% of young job seekers received a successful offer within 3 months of registering as unemployed. The Finnish scheme has led to personalized plans for young people being grown up more quickly and lowering unemployment. To make the youth guarantee a reality, the national budgets should prioritize youth employment to avoid higher costs in the future. So the EU will top up the national spending on these schemes through the European Social Fund and 6 billion of youth employment initiative. In its 2014 country-specific recommendations, the Commission has advised prioritize the outreach to non-registered youth and mobilize the private sector to offer more internships to improve labor market relevance and quality of education. Not by the modernizing and qualification systems, putting in place quality assurance mechanism and improving school to work transition. In 2015, country reports, the Commission acknowledged that Croatia has been taking a range of measures to address youth unemployment by stepping a structural weakness in vocational education and training and education systems remains priority to address labor market needs. I also can say something about Erasmus Student Network. It is a non-profit international student organization, and their mission is to represent international students, to provide opportunities for the cultural understanding and also the self-development under the principle students help students. Now I don't know if it is possible to show the video.
Yes, it's possible.
So Yasmina, I don't know, is it possible in this moment or later?
It's possible in this moment. Yes, we can put the video. Just a second.
Okay, thank you.
Sound funny, but in this separation, we are truly coming together. We forgot about those differences. We were curious for each other as who we are. We understood that difference is not a reason for division after all. We were united in diversity. This experience keeps us going for a long time. It makes us stronger to face the issues of an unknown future. We are not asking anymore what we can get, but rather how we can contribute. That's how you solve problems. That's how you move forward. There was a moment in history when a group of homecoming Erasmus students joined forces to help their local exchange students. A new era began back in 1989 when the Erasmus Student Network was born. Over the course of 25 years, the initiative of only one group of students has grown to become what is now the biggest student organization in Europe. We are at hundreds of universities all across Europe, helping hundreds of thousands of students every single day. We are the Erasmus generation. We are the first generation of Europeans. It is the first time in history that we are all united in one network. It is our time, and we act with one vision for the enrichment of society through international students. Our movement influences the decisions of European politicians that will not only affect us, but also millions of students in the generations to come. Yet, at the end of the day, it's not just about the big decisions on the international level. From the international to the local level, everything is connected. That's a network. The big decisions make change possible, and what brings the mightiest change are the smallest acts of students helping students. Every day, at home, on the local level, we are uniting different people. That's what we work for, all across Europe. This is moving Europe together. This is the movement of the Erasmus Student Network. This is ESN.
Okay, Hrvoje, do you hear us?
Yes, I heard.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation. You can stay online and we will have a section of questions after. So feel free to listen to all the other speakers. I'm calling on the stage now one of our participants from Germany, David. He will give us a presentation on the topic of corruption in Southeastern Europe. David studies political science and media studies. He's currently trainee at the Public Institute. Okay, you can put.
Can I take this table?
Yeah, okay, you can put it here, so it makes it easier. So to keep on, he's currently trainee at the Public Institute Center for the Study of Democracy in Bulgaria, which coordinates the Anti-Corruption and Good Governance Coalition, CELDI. David, your 7 minutes start now.
F5, yeah?
Here you go.
Okay. I'll, all right, yeah, thank you. And okay, that's the wrong slide, yeah. That's the second one. Can you start it again? Yeah, that's the first one, okay.
F5.
3, 2, 1. All right. Okay. So, hello and welcome to my presentation. I will give a short overview over the major aspects of corruption in Southeast Europe. And I'm representing today the CELDI Anti-Corruption Initiative, which coordinates 17 NGOs in the areas of corruption and good governance in the region. And the content of this presentation is based on research conducted by CELDI and published in the report last year. So first, I will start with taking a look at the state of art of corruption in the region, and then continue by demonstrating some challenges faced by anti-corruption bodies. And finally, conclude this small presentation with 3 key recommendations what needs to be done in order to fight corruption in the region. So first, if we think about corruption, there are different definitions, it is always quite difficult to define it because there's a lot of gray area. Where are the borders? Where does it start with corruption? But what is essential for most of the definitions is that it's about an abuse of power for private or group interest, and this is a very essential part. And the methodology CELDI used is the corruption monitoring system, which enables to capture the state of art of corruption as well as trends, and also facilitates to compare it between countries. And the major outcomes are categorized into 3 areas that you can see here: experience-based corruption indexes, attitudes, and assessment of the corruption environment. And each of these areas contains different indexes that measure different aspects of corruption. So we will take a closer look now on experience-based corruption indexes, involvement, and pressure. And the ranking you can see here, okay, I can already see it on my on my laptop. The ranking you can see here is based on the corruption involvement. And we can see that corruption pressure corresponds mainly to the same ranking beside Turkey and Bulgaria. And corruption involvement captures instances of individuals paying unofficial sums of money to public officials. And the corruption pressure reflects instances of public officials seeking directly or indirectly for a bribe. And taking this into account, it is important to fight against corruption. And an important part of that are corruption institutions, but they often lack authority and capacity. Often they only have supervisory power and lack competences when it comes to staff, when it comes to budget. This is really a main difficulty. And often anti-corruption legislation in the region is in place, but the enforcement in the field lacks. So similar problem with lack of capacity is also faced by the judiciary, and this leads especially to a dangerous high amount of backlogs of cases. So cases cannot be made really effectively, and this is a problem also for the trust into the judiciary. An essential part in the fight against corruption has civil society organizations, but their role needs to be further strengthened and also ensured that their funding is independent from government influence and that they can then conduct this research. So, taking all these into consideration, I conclude that it is essentially important to sentence high-level politicians because this gives a strong picture. This is in the media, this gives an example to all the people to say there is something, corruption is not tolerated. Secondly, an effective monitoring system needs to be implemented in the countries and also over the countries in the region and also be independent from government influence. So European Union funding plays a quite essential part in this term. And as the third aspect, when we talk about corruption, what is important is really to focus on critical areas. Critical areas are mainly where the big money is flowing and not a lot of attention is paid. For example, the energy sector, large-scale investment projects, privatization projects, all this is very important to focus attention on. So, yeah, overall, it is really important if you want to fight corruption to take steps on different levels and to put it on the agenda. And for everybody who wants to improve the region and good governance in the region, this is an essential part. Thank you. So we will have time, approximately 5 minutes, for some questions. This was pretty fast now, but maybe somebody has some questions. Yeah.
Ilya, already? Okay. Feel free to ask.
Thank you. I want to ask about your recommendations. Yeah? On what they are based? What's the support of your recommendation? A study? Can you explain it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, so what I present here is the report. It is called Corruption Reloaded. You can also download it in the internet if you follow the Saldi link. This is the content of this presentation, and as a conclusion, it is kind of a expert assessment, taking statistically research into account of where are the problems, but it is still kind of a subjective expert assessment. So the Center for the Study of Democracy is also a public policy institute. It means that during research, the methods are scientific, but still it is a public institute that allows to give kind of a personal opinion of the leading elite, and so this is based on this.
Here, Nikos.
Okay, thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I wanted to ask one thing in terms of methods. You showed some statistics about actual experience with corruption.
We can show them again.
However, if you compare those statistics to the statistics of the official report of the Commission that it was carried out in 2013 and 2014, the numbers are significantly lower. I mean, you have an actual experience in Bulgaria of about 40%, and the actual experience in the European report is around 10 or 11 or something like that. And I would like to ask you if you have some kind of explanation. I know that it's difficult. It's a difficult question to ask. That if you have some explanation about these variations in the results. And one other thing about
which report do you mean? Do you mean the progress report?
Yes. No, not the progress report. I'm talking about the report that has been carried out by the anti-corp body. The main anti-corruption instrument of the European Union. For the first time, they have conducted the research throughout and comparatively throughout the European Union. Just it struck me, I'm not second-guessing the CSD results because they are doing an excellent work. And one more comment, CSD has been working with all governments since 1991, the institute that you represent. So to make it clear, because it it's a public policy institution, but it's working with all governments since the political changes.
Okay. Yeah, first I would like to answer on this question and the next one. I don't really know the data of this report from the European Commission you're referring to, so it's hard to make a sophisticated statement, but like one thing I could imagine is that the data I presented, it is based on administrative corruption. So it's a very particular space, and I could imagine that this report is maybe about broader issues like economic corruption, and also sure there's always like differences into statistical methods. So this is also an explanation, and yeah.
Little comment. What is important in our country? If your institute is working with government, as Nico said, is it possible your institute to be corrupted?
Well, it's a rhetoric question, and I mean, like, in general, this is every institute is possible to be like, to have this danger of being influenced by corrupted things. And for example, state capture, if we come to this issue, it's also a big problem for CSOs. But if we talk about working with governments, it is not like the institute is funded by government, and that it is like taking the government agenda and all these stuff. So it is, I mean, it is working with the government on a constructive level. And what also the former speaker said, the third speaker we already had, it is more like really like knocking on the table of the government and saying we would like to implement this, and often the government then also cooperates in a way to say, yeah, we are cooperating with the Center for the Study of Democracy. It's kind of, it sounds good, but like really implementing the recommendations into legal aspects is then something that's often missing. And we see corruption also as a major campaigning issue in all over the countries for the government parties, but also for the opposition parties. And this is also quite a problem in that sense that there lacks and like effective steps afterwards, because it's really a problem for the public trust if all the parties talk all the time about corruption and what they want to do about corruption, and then they go into government and not a lot happens. And so many politicians use the issue of corruption in order for their own benefits without real implementation at the end.
Miss Lydia wanted to give a contribution. Feel free.
If you allow me, I'd like to just contribute to one thing. If you look at the slide, it says how many people have been asked for a bribe. So it's very specific. Not too many people have been asked for a bribe, but this is not the whole study. And the study that you're talking about is they're measuring the perception, which is a completely different methodology. So in all fairness, I think this is just one small instance that we're looking at. And another thing that I think ought to be mentioned, I mean, what is a think tank? You have to cooperate with the government if you're a think tank. You need the data. The only way that you can have access to the data is if you have some kind of cooperation with the government, because the government is the body that actually holds the data. As a think tank, you have to be evidence-based. The only way you can be evidence-based is to cooperate with the government. That's not the issue. The issue is how much the cooperation is based on some kind of ethical, I don't know, previously some kind of a partnership that you have already established. And these are different issues, how you can actually regulate. But corruption, I don't think, what I'm trying to say, I don't think that this one slide gives you an idea of how the situation of corruption within the region.
Well, I mean, the funding is very essential. It's not only about ethical cooperation. So, I mean, the question is good because it is really a problem that government funding can like reduce independence of NGOs, and it is very important. What is also interesting to mention to this slide is we see quite high levels of differences between the countries, but we need to be aware that still, even though we consider Turkey, it's nearly 10% of corruption involvement and pressure. corruption in all over the countries is a mass phenomenon, and we really need to see it as a mass phenomenon in that sense.
Okay, thank you. There was one more question here, and then we will keep on. Marcello, from Italy. Feel free to ask.
I am Marcello from Italy, and yeah, we have some kind of experience on corruption in Italy as well. But what my question was like to change a little bit the point of view. What I was doing in Italy is like collaborating with Libera, which is an association that works against corruption on the grassroots level. So my question was, your opinion
On the Brussels level.
grassroots, yeah, like the importance of like what we call like social anti-corruption, which means like working on grassroots levels through CSOs, of course, to build like an environment, a positive environment that would stop the corruption from the grassroots and not from the top-down approach.
Yeah, I mean, so the conclusion of our research is that corruption is mainly a structural problem, an institutional problem, and so the main efforts need to be done on structural level, find structures and effective institutions that make it not possible and not necessary for the people to be corrupted. But it's a interesting dialogue also in the field of studies to which extent kind of cultural corruption plays a role, or is it more a structural problem? From our point of view, it's mainly a structural problem, but sure, also a cultural problem in many cases. And so grassroots organizations are a good opportunity to find this kind of perception, this resistance of young people against corruption, or of all the people. And what is also interesting, what also statistics say, is that when people believe that that the corruption is decreasing, that there's something improving, they're more willing also to resist against corruption. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but it was interesting that also our research was showing this. And so it is an essential part to give the people hope and to make them motivated, because many people are really kind of depressed or resignated. I mean, when I was traveling a little bit in the region and talk with people, sometimes they were just laughing and saying, "Oh, come on, you come from Germany, you want to fight corruption, this is like, it's just the way it is here." And I mean, it is to a certain extent the way it is, but also to an extent the people accept it to be, and so it is still, and people don't like it, even though they might be resignated. Like after a longer conversation, many people are just frustrated, but they don't want this, and so it is really important through grassroots levels to activate young people. Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. All the others who had any question at this moment, feel free to note it, and then we will have the second session of questions after Ms. Lydia gives her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak on your conference, because I always enjoy speaking to young people. And I really think that's the future of... now, this sounded so politically, I mean, horrible, really. But no, I do like young people, and I think it really is nice working with young people. The topic that I'm supposed to cover today is about European funds and why do we use them and why do we abuse them, or do we abuse them at all? I cannot speak about the other countries, but in Macedonia there is massive abuse of European funds, and there is massive non-action or impunity. This is the word the EU loves. This is the word that they keep on talking to the governments, that you shouldn't allow corruption to happen, but because you have to make the people pay, so that they can understand that being corrupt does not pay off. However, in the case of Macedonia, this is not the case. But before I go into explaining, and I'm not going to talk too much about Macedonia because I know not all of you are from here and it's not your thing and you're not interested in the details. But I think I should mention something from the perspective of the European Union, where we all get loads of funds and that should supposed to help us. The European money comes in my country for two reasons. One is for the reforms, and this comes through an instrument called Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance. And this is the instrument that's supposed to help the country, the institutions, so that they can build up the institutions and get the country ready for membership of the European Union. And there are the so-called the union programs. Well, maybe some of you have heard them as community programs, where Erasmus comes from and the other funds come from. Macedonia, as a candidate country, has access to this money as well. Now, I think we should make a distinction at first about the money. When we're talking about community programs or union programs, as they're called at the moment, we're talking about policy areas that are not European Union. They're not under the competence of the Commission, which means we're talking about national politics. We're not talking about European politics. In other words, if we're talking about youth, and there is Erasmus Mundus, or the Erasmus Plus at the moment, a program, this means that the competence over this issue is not on the part of the EU. It's on the part of the member state. So the member states are those that create the policies behind all of the programs that fall under the group of the so-called union programs, those being youth, culture, education. So none of the countries are giving their competence to the EU. How can the EU help in that respect? By putting in place all of these funds and making the countries cooperate in these fields that hopefully after 10, 20, 30, who knows how many years, there might be a possibility that there could be a new European youth policy, for example. But for the time being, the competence is within the national member states. So how do we actually distribute the money? And that is fairly easy as well, because there's a whole process. Then there's maybe some of you have heard of the so-called financial perspective. The financial perspectives are 7 years. We're talking about a strategy and the money behind the strategy. The strategy is called Europe 2020. And then there's the money behind Europe 2020, which is a 7-year budget, which means in actual fact, starting from day 1, 1st of January 2014, we know about every euro cent, how it's going to be spent. So from this perspective, one can ask, if we know how the money is going to be spent, then it is much easier to plan everything for the next 7 years. And in that respect, bearing in mind the fact that we have information technology, look, we're speaking with Brussels now, and he's not even in the room, but we can have a communication. Now, if that is true, then why do we need offices in Brussels? I mean, this is a question that I have for the representative for Brussels. Unless we're talking about influencing policy, I don't think we need offices in Brussels. Offices, I mean, like regional organizations, because everything should be available via the internet, via the transparency guidelines, via the programs that are planned on an annual basis, via the reports that should be written, and if there is no corruption, then everything should be, very clear and understandable. Unfortunately, this is not how it goes. If you talk with people, and this is a discussion that we have had in our country for the last, I don't know how many years, because we also, I think the city of Skopje has an office in Brussels, and we've never heard what they're doing at this office, except that they're spending the money. And they haven't had any success at all. And if you talk to them, why do you have your office there? And Croatia is a different case because Croatia is a member state and Macedonia isn't. So if you ask them, why do you have your office in Brussels? Because you cannot influence policies. You're not a member state. How can you influence policies in terms of seeing what kind of projects are going to be supported within the next 7 years? Because we're talking 7 years. They would say lobbying. Now, this is a very difficult word to understand. What do we mean by lobbying? What we usually mean in this part of the world is that you find someone who is involved in the evaluation committee, you become a friend with him, define the percentage of the commission, and this is how you get the project. And this is not supposed to be the way things should work. I don't know whether any of you have heard of IATI. Maybe David, you're with the corruption. Have you heard of IATI? IATI. This is an initiative from the Open Government Initiative. IATI stands for International Aid. I'm sorry. International Aid Transparency Initiative. Now, according to this initiative, every money, and when I say international aid, I don't mean IPA, I don't mean community programs, I mean loans, I mean European Investment Bank, I mean the big money, the energy, the cohesion funds, everything should have simple rules to follow so that people can see the rules and follow them. You don't need to be an expert to see how the money is spent. But what we have at the moment on the level of the European Union is unless you're an expert, you have no idea how the money is spent. You can see it in front of you, you see the numbers, and you don't understand them. And this is not transparency. Transparency doesn't mean just to put everything online. Transparency means to put the data online in a form that is understandable for the people. It is understandable for the citizens so that they can come to reach conclusions, so that they can actually check how you're working. And this is not the case at the moment. I'm going to give you some examples with what has happened in Macedonia. In Macedonia, we have, this is from some previous years, but we have you've heard about the National Agency it's called National Agency for European Educational Programs and Mobility. Well, for lifelong learning at the time, you have to have this independent body that is supposed to give the grants and provide assistance to the NGOs who will get grants. As part of the institution building process within the IPA, there was money was made available to set up this agency because it's a completely different new structure, to set up the agency, and there was money set aside from IPA for preparatory measures, which means training the staff that's going to work there, and also for having a call for proposals so that the youth organizations can apply and they can give them grants. So learning by doing, in actual fact. A small amount was given there. Now, what happened during the establishment of this agency was that the first call was given to 7 NGOs that were completely corrupted. Corrupted in what sense? All of them, from organization number 1 until the 7th organization, they were all linked to the 5 people that were in the board, in the educational board, in the executive board of the agency. And I'm just going to tell you, shorten the story. What happened was this was We as an organization, because I come back from a think tank organization, we picked this up. We wrote it in our accession watch process, then the reports. Then journalists came to us. They started investigating as they're supposed to be. And then all of a sudden Brussels started panicking. So what they did was they sent Olaf. They came here and they saw that, yes, there was abuse of money. And they suspended the money with the national agency. They suspended the money for 2 years, made the agency come up with an action plan so that there is some kind of remedy within the institution, and then they let the institution run again. But in actual fact, nothing happened except for the director who resigned. None of the employees were let off. Nothing, they changed the law, but, you know, nothing in actual fact really changed. And even today, this group of 7 NGOs, youth NGOs, is now probably 70, who knows how many, and they're all linked to the governing party in Macedonia. So they are using European money so that they can cause misery to the rest of the youth organizations in the country. And this is really, this is thanks to the European money and to the European Commission in Skopje, who actually allowed this to happen. Now today we have a report which says in Macedonia there is a problem with the so-called state capture. We even gave it a term. It's called state capture. Of course we have a state capture because every single dime in the country is going for party people that are from political party. We really have a problem with this. And this is not me speaking as an opposition. This is the report of the European Union. It's the latest report. And now, how do we really solve the problem? Well, I don't know how we solve the problem, but I know that the European Commission and the European funds are not, the European institutions are not working as they are supposed to be. I'll give you another example. With IPA, Component 3, we are building a motorway. About 35 million of the whole stretch comes from the IPA 3 component, which means European money. The opposition came out and with a press conference with names of people with the following ingredient of the press. We've actually realized that in Negotino, which is a small town in Macedonia, every Friday, buses come from Greece, go to Negotino to Stopanska Banka, and they take out money, cash, denas, and these are buses. I mean, you know, not one bus, there are buses. We're talking about 100 and something people every Friday. So they go and they take out money, different amounts. Some take out 10,000 euros, some take out 20,000, some take out 100,000 euro. They take out the dinners and they go to the bank and they buy euros with that money and they go back to Greece. They don't take the money with them. We have no idea where the money is. And this is from the project from IPA 3. So we came up with a press conference and we said, what is happening? And as an opposition, we keep pushing for answers. What we got from the European Commission is that we're looking into the matter. And this was 2 years ago. They're still looking into the matter. And then all of a sudden, a few months ago, there is a special report on Greece because of the corruption in Greece. And among the many things, the OECD is giving comments about the same actor case in Macedonia with 2 or 3 sentences because the report is on Greece, it's not on Macedonia, which is acknowledging that something is wrong. Until today, we have no idea what's wrong. We just know that there are people, that they took out the money from the bank, and the money, because, you know, if you take the money back in cash, you have to take through the border, and everyone will know. We have no idea where the money is, and it's still a misery. I'll give you the latest example that goes back to the difficulties of understanding the rules of the European Union. There is one twinning project. Probably most of you understand what a twinning project is. So there are the institutions. It's an institutional building instrument. The institutions from the member states who win the project. So there is a bidding process previously. The one that wins the process comes into the country. They go within the institution they're trying to build. They help them with establishing institutional-wise. So we have one twinning that comes to the country, and it's supposed to help the Anti-Corruption Commission of Macedonia in setting up different things, in setting up the institution. This twinning project was won by a consortium of two organizations. One is a German one, the other one is, I think it's a Polish organization. So from the corruption offices of these two organizations, there is a consortium that won the bid. They come to the country, they set themselves up, they opened the office, they met with everyone. One of the things that they had to work on was a campaign on anti-corruption. We met with most of them. And then after 6 months, the so-called twinning, the resident twinning advisor goes to the German embassy. The German person, who is the main person, he goes and says, I can't take this any longer. Nothing is moving in the country. The government doesn't want to do anything, so I'm leaving the project. I am not going to continue with the project. Now, according to the rules, this project should, the European Union should step in and say, sorry, but because he's the main twinning, the resident twinning advisor, and when you do the evaluation of the bids, most of the points go to the twinning advisor. So if it wasn't for him, if it was somebody else, then maybe the results of the whole bidding process would have been different. So because of that, they are supposed to stop the project. But the project is still going on. We still have the project going on, and nobody's saying nothing. What am I trying to say? The European Union, most of the time, can get away with it just because the rules are too complicated. And most of the people do not understand. Even if you go on a press conference, I mean, I've had so many press conferences on these issues, people do not understand what you're talking about. You get the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister coming up and saying, and they're playing with the numbers. They say, Macedonia, the absorption capacity of IPA is 35%. Or 40%, I mean, usually it's 40% because they put some percent more. But that's not the case. What they're talking about is that, how much of the IPA is contracted, not how much it's absorbed. And this is a completely different thing. And it is spinning the numbers. But you cannot go out on a press conference and explain that to the citizens because it's completely unexplainable unless you're an expert on the issue. So I think my message from here is that the European Union should be part of this initiative. And they should find a way of how to give you data, how to give us data in a format that is much more easier to understand, and they should stop corruption, at least in the countries where they're supporting at the moment. So hopefully, maybe in the near future, we will see some better projects that will contribute to this. But to give things on a better note, the European projects that have contributed tremendously within the development of Europe. I'll just give you an example. I'll take a worse example for Spain. When Spain became member of the European Union, or even Portugal, it only had 17 kilometers of asphalt. And then it became, once you have the opportunity to use the cohesion funds, the European Investment Bank, then it's a completely different story. Then really growth happens. So we should be grateful for the possibilities that are out there, but I think we must demand more transparency and greater openness. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a nice. Yes, we already have a question. Go on, Damir.
Lydia, thank you very much for the presentation and for the previous presentations. What I want to stress, or what I want to focus maybe the discussion is how we can do oversight on the spending, on the legality of spending. That's one thing that we are always looking into, but maybe it's not the crucial thing. Is whether the money. The other thing that we need to look into is whether the money is spent for the right things. I mean, yeah, we're investing in some institutions all the time, and most of the money usually go to this technical assistance to the institutions, and this money are usually given to consortiums that have these foreign advisors that actually take back the money to the EU, and we don't, at the end, we don't know the result. We still have weak institutions. So how do we, as not young people, but as civil society, as media, do oversight on this? How does the parliament do oversight on this? Do we have the mechanisms to do this? Plus, if we look at the numbers for IPA 2, from around 3 billion euros that are for this multi-beneficiary programs, only 125 million, so from 3 billion, only 125 million will go to civil society and media in the next, until 2020. And that's nothing. I mean, if civil society should do oversight, if media should be able to do oversight, then we have problem, we have structural problem in the way these instruments are constructed, because then EU actually doesn't want to be this funds to be overseen. So do we have a strategy? Do we have some recommendations on how we can do a more effective oversight on the spending of IPA funds? Thank you.
Very complicated question, but I'll give you, I'll try to give you a non-complicated answer. I think, first of all, one of the reasons why this is so complicated is because of the personal factor. By personal factor, what do I mean? You know, the foreigners that come to the country, they work in the delegation, and they are task managers for a certain, you know, sector, for example. And, you know, they have, let's say, 10 million euro to spend within these 3 years. You know, when they program the money, they program the money sector-wise now. So they're in charge of, let's say, 30 million, right? Now, if I have to manage 30 million, it is so easy to manage the 30 million if I give it to one construction company to build a road. So this is one thing. And the other thing is that I can have grant schemes. And these grant schemes can give grants to NGOs like youth NGOs or other NGOs. And the grants, bearing in mind the capacity, financial capacity of the country, the grant schemes could, in average, be something like 10 to 50 million, to 50,000. Now, if this 30 million, you divide from 10 to 50,000, this one person will have to monitor the work of how many hundreds of people, maybe even thousands. Now, if I were in charge, I would be stupid to work on grant schemes. And this is a fact. And it's a fact on both sides. It's a fact on the part of the government, and it's a fact on the part of the EU. So this is why it's important for the civil society to come in and to tell them, yes, it is true, this is more complicated, get more people on board, we don't care, find other means how you can do it, and get more money in place. What you're reading, the numbers, is the multi-beneficiary IPA. Yes. Thank God that's a small number. That's good news. And you know why it's good news? That is Taxo, the project that did nothing in the last 7 years. it is the multi-beneficiary. But what is going to happen with IPA 2 is that what we actually, I mean, when I say me, I mean, you know, me from my previous life as a think tank, person from the think tank. What we did in the last 2 or 3 years, I think you know it completely, you were involved in some of the activities. We came up with a study where we proved that the European Commission must find ways of how to actually have a certain percentage of the money within the sectors. So now we didn't get the 10% that we were asking, we got 2%, which is not bad. 2% is not bad. And now what we have at the moment is that IPA 2 will provide on annual basis 5 million euros for civil society organizations. That is a lot of money. We didn't get 5 million within the whole 7 years of IPA 1. Now we come to a second problem. If you have so much money available, automatically, there is the rule number 1, co-financing. These NGOs cannot provide the money for co-financing. The money for co-financing has to come from the government. And the government does not want to provide this money because if they do give you the money, then they can't control you because it's only 10%. So this is another issue to work on and look at. What I can say at this point is that from my political party, because I come from the think tanking community, from the civil society, I'm given the authority to actually work on a law for providing financial sustainability of NGO. So, you know, that study that I'm actually going to put it through Parliament. So that is the good news, and I'm waiting for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Damir. Thank you, Lydia. Now I will call on the stage our next... You had a question. Okay, feel free, question, and then you will come on the stage. Okay. Nikos?
So, yes, what I want to say is that a basketball coach once said that when people want to avoid making decisions, they make rules. So this is what you're saying, and this is... but coming from Greece, and a country with a very bitter experience with European Union money abuse, I have to say that there are two parties. Let's not forget that. We don't have bad Macedonian, bad Greek guys, and good, clean, transparent, good governance-based European partners. There are two parties in each transaction. So I think we also need to take into consideration given that, especially in the past, no one ever knew where the money went. Maybe now the mechanisms are put in place, but in Greece in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000, money were given, no one controlled it. And I have to ask myself, is it only the person who abuses fault, the abuser's fault, or is it also the person who gives the money fault as well? Because if I give you 100 euro, I have to know what you're doing with it. And we're talking about billions now.
Just to give a small comment, maybe.
Microphone?
Okay. To the issue of misusing of EU funds, I would also like to highlight that the supervisory mechanism therefore might also be kind of a part of the problem, because especially in countries where it's mainly a part of the national countries, and the role of the European Commission and the EU is mainly to monitor the system, the process itself, but not really to monitor at the end of the process, the people behind the organizations that take that money. And if the states, the member states are weak, the NGOs in the states are weak, this is really a problem. And so it might be also interesting to discuss in how far it might be beneficial to strengthen the competences maybe of the European Commission in some areas, not only to monitor the system, the process itself, but also the end of the process.
Yes, I agree with you. Maybe not to strengthen, but definitely I think there should be more people employed within OLAF. And definitely I think there should be more work for the European Court of Auditors. The European rules provide for them to have this kind of experience. But it's so easy to get away with it. It is so easy. I have in front of me 3 reports that we have written about the national agency. They're all 3 of them about the misuse of European funds. Some is from IPA, even the ones from the community program from Lifelong Learning and Youth in Action, one of them. And when we went on a press conference, I went on a press conference and I had the people from the delegation send someone to hear what's going on. And I gave them the reports, and then I had meetings with the embassies. Every embassy called me, every embassy. We had meetings, we talked about their reports, and they said, we'll see what the commission is going to say. And then this guy comes, I get a telephone call from someone from the commission, from the delegation, one of the person, the task manager who's in charge of this. And he said, okay, I heard that you had a report. I would like to speak to you, meet you. I said, no problem. So let's meet. Tuesday, bam, in my office, okay. And there comes this Italian guy. He was Italian. And we start chit-chatting. I mean, about everything, except about the report. And then he says, oh, I see you're very upset. He said, but it's not perfect. You should just hear how things are in Italy. And I looked at him, I said, did you read the report? He hadn't read the report. So, as I said, I'm not saying bad stuff about the European Commission. I'm just saying there are different people there. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. And I reported him, I said, look, I stood up and I said, read the report and you can call me and then we can have a discussion. Don't waste my time. It is not... And I think this is very important. Civil society organizations, you really have to be so strong. You cannot let them get away with it. And when I say let them get away, I'm not talking about the commission. I'm talking about the politicians. I'm talking about the position and the opposition. Coming from the opposition, you should do the same thing. I'm going to be so honest. It's my 1.5 year within the political party. And I'm a member of parliament because I proved myself that I know something. But I'm telling you, hardly anyone within my political party understands civil society. So you really have to push. You really have to push. And find people like me so that we can have networks. Thanks.
Okay, now I will call on the stage. Sorry, I will ask you for a question after. And now on the stage, I'm calling Mr. Nikos Papakostas. He will give us a presentation. He's a co-founder of Inter Alia, think tank, civil and youth organization. Here it is, your microphone.
Thank you.
And the headline of his presentation is Ask the Locals. So let's see what he asked the locals. Nikos, here you go, 7 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. I'll try to be brief. I don't want to bore you to death. Inter Alia is a project that we started about 2.5 years ago. Does anyone know what Inter Alia means? What does it stand for? No? What? It is Latin and it stands for... Do you have it? Among other things, yes, exactly. And this was our actual project, to stand among other teams, other groups, other organizations in Europe, create networks, a key word, and try to make the European Union work. We're trying to engage young people, but also older people, not only the young, in the process of decision making. We're trying to deconstruct intra-European Union stereotypes that have been strengthened all the more due to the crisis. We're trying to use the talents and the skills and the competences of young people in order to increase employability. And importantly, we're trying to apply a multidisciplinary approach to everything. We feel that going deeper and deeper into one science and one point of view in one approach, it's not the best way to go. So we're having near us people from different disciplines, from different sectors, in order to work together and find some common solutions. And what are we going to ask the locals? Just a moment. Yes. This is the logo of our ongoing project. It just started in August 2015, and I wanted to introduce it to you, to young people, and to invite you to ask me stuff about it, because it is a big honor of us to implement it. It's co-funded by the Europe for Citizens program of the European Union, which is super competitive, and we feel really proud to be able to get this funding. The subtitle is Enhancing Resource Accessibility Through Local Empowerment. In other words, this means how people can have access to resources or are not blocked from receiving resources through local engagement and local empowerment. The starting point was just a brief sentence of a very, very wise lady who I'm a supporter and admirer of. She's an academic. That 30 years of EU evaluations have not managed to uncover what any Sicilian villager could have told them from the onset. What's the money really for and how it is spent? This means that there are informal networks, especially in small societies, probably not in Athens, not in Skopje, and not in Sofia, but in small societies, people know, people talk, people gossip. And the gossiping is a really important asset in the fight against corruption. From my point of view, because they know the dirt of their people next to them. Of course, we're not a prosecutory agency. We don't want to put them to jail. We don't care about that. But we want to inform them and use the information that they have to give us in order to re-inform them on how they can deal with it the next time they're faced with it. And of course, through their inputs, we want to introduce this topic to the people who have same experiences. So the aims of the project, really briefly, is to engage and empower the losing side of corruption. All these people who have not taken the bribe, but they have been stereotyped against. For instance, Greece. We talked about corruption in Greece. Okay, of course there is corruption in Greece. There is corruption all over the world. Previously, we discussed about the northern and southern Italy corruption levels. Having lived in Sicily for over a year, I disagree strongly with that. The biggest scandals are in northern Italy and not in southern Italy. There is petty bribe and corruption in southern Italy, but the real problem is in the north, from my point of view. Inform about and actively promote fair access to resources as a way out of crisis. This is very important for Greece. Because if we manage to use properly resources available, because there are so many, there are really so many, if we use them properly, crisis will be passed in 1 year's time, in 6 months. It is irrelevant at the time, because we are going to be able to work on something that matters, something that we like, something that could make a difference. Correct misperception about people and their attitude towards corruption. Bulgarians are corrupt. Greeks are corrupt, Macedonians are lazy, and so on and so forth. This is just wrong. This is a mistake. This is a stereotype that we personally I cannot take in this European Union and in my capacity as a European citizen. And promote social participation and initiative as an antidote to corruption. This is the engagement of people to empower them to fight corruption on their own. Because on an institutional level, I totally agree. I have studied corruption. I have studied the theory of corruption. However, institutions are one thing. It's very good to have them in place. However, it takes, again, the constraints that are put by the society, by collective action. Do I have something more? Excuse me. Okay. I'm guessing that what I had... the partner. Yes, this is very, very, very important. The partnership it consists of Inter Alia, which is us, Youth Alliance Krusevo, who jumped into the project as soon as they heard about it. They liked the idea and they helped a lot. Prism, which is from Sicily. It's from a small town in the center of Sicily, and they're really brilliant people. Look them up. Serb Civic Initiatives, the Romanian Youth Movement for Democracy in Romania, and the Center for the Study of Democracy that we talked about previously, and we're very happy to have them on board. This was the Ask the Local project. Do I have any?
Few more minutes.
Okay. This is just another project, another approach to the region of the Western Balkans. We're trying to apply a different kind of mentality in academic thought about the region of the Western Balkans. So for this reason, we published, we edited, and Ibidem Verlag, which is a publishing house in Germany, published this collective volume. It's about the region. It refers to social sustainability. And of course, you can read it and buy it and support us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikos. Okay, so these are all speeches now, and it's time for questions, to keep on going with questions. Feel free to raise your hands if anybody has a question for Nikos at the moment, or feel free. Yes.
Hola. I'm again, Carlo from Germany. My biography not changed. I have just a comment, because we was talking about a lot of abusing European Union funds, and I want to talk about some positive sides of the European Union. Not loud enough? Okay. And so I want to speak because I come from the eastern part of Germany, and when I ask my parents' generation or the generation of my grandparents, they do not define as Europeans. And of course, they have more the problem to define themselves as Germans and members of a reunified Germany, and not as members of the former GDR. But that is an old problem. But when I ask the young generation in Germany, very often they do not declare themselves as European, and that is a very huge problem, I think. And I personally have a dream, or have the dream, that my children or my grandchildren will define themselves as Europeans and not as members of national states, and that we can fight against nationalism in that great issue. And of course, the European Union can do a lot to be union of economic and maybe also about a politic union, but the best money the European Union can invest is in the future, and especially in programs like Erasmus+, like in the EVS, what is kind of in international training courses and also in conferences like that. And for me, I want just to give the comment, when we really want to build a union of European values, we have to invest in the future and exactly in programs we are doing now and what we are looking forward in the moment. Okay, thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Just a brief comment on the thing that you said about European values. The ownership of European values, European values are not something that is owned by one member state or the other. So what I need to say here is that the countries here in the Western Balkans, but also the southern countries that have been silent throughout this past period, they need to have their inputs in forming, in creating those European values. And I totally agree with the rest of your points.
If I left the impression that I'm too critical towards the EU, I'm sorry. I think my opinion is that the best political system in the world is the EU at the moment. This is what it has its faults, but it's the best at the moment. And I'm personally in love with the EU. But I think we have to see things with a critical eye so that we can improve them.
Of course.
I mean, when you look at the migrants today, are you so proud that you're European? Now, we have to see the problems.
Istok, time for question.
Okay. Hello, Istok, Slovenia. The critical point that you mentioned now for the European Union, I'll make a comment which will evolve into a question. The way I see it, the way you presented it also, good examples of using the finances from the EU and not so good examples of using it is that, well, my understanding is that the problem is in the focus, which is also related to the previous topic. For instance, when you have countries becoming members of EU or countries beneficiaries of some finances, that the focus is on establishing the institutions, creating the structures. But if the focus is there, that means that at the really grassroots level, at the level of the, let's say, foundations, things are not ready for that kind of structures or that kind of institutes to be able to function the way they're supposed to function. So when EU puts financial incentives, stuff like this, into this is the way we would like things to be, it cannot be effective if the focus is based on the way we would like it to be and doesn't start from what our colleague from Greece was focusing and presenting from, okay, where we are now first, and creating the, let's say, the predispositions for those institutes and those structures to be able to be functional. And I'm wondering, do you believe that a possible solution could be with when you mentioned the problem for some NGOs is that if you have a lot of funds, but it's still just financing 85%, and they cannot get the 15% because the government will not support them, that some mechanisms would be established that would check which NGOs, civil society organizations are healthy, are functioning healthy, and finance them fully. Would this be maybe a step towards that, creating the context for institutions to be able to function so that they're not just, okay, we have the checklist, you can now join the EU. No, it's not just having the structure. Is the base of the structure healthy so that it can actually perform their task? So, thank you.
From my experience, I think the problem starts with the programming of the funds. Sometimes when you program the funds, they are too ambitious. And if it's too ambitious, and I mean, the European rules are so rigid. If the project fish is too ambitious, you cannot change it, because changing the fish means postponing the project for 2 years. And that means that you probably are going to lose the money in the future. So what usually happens is that the people that are in charge, the task managers on both sides, on the government and in the commission, they get so anxious because they're going to lose the money, and they don't want that on their CV. I mean, it looks bad. So they're just going to take the money, use it, and this is why you don't have the result at the end, because it's not there. And yes, the institution wasn't ready. So it means that the analysis, the evidence-based that you should do the programming is not there. And I'll give you a very specific example. I don't know whether you've seen, but there's the Southeast European Strategy 2020, where there are, for the first time, mind you, benchmarks. We have indicators for the first time. They're a bit too ambitious, if you ask me, but I don't mind. We're not going to meet them, but I don't mind. But it's for the first time. And when this was being programmed, or when this was being actually developed, my question was, on the basis of what data are you basing the situation in Macedonia when we don't have a census for how many years? Since 2002. So, I mean, what kind of a data is that? So what are you expecting? And you shouldn't measure the output. You should measure the outcome. And this is a major difference that I think it ought to be looked into. And again, it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of of moving things, but it's slowly, it's very slow. And, we should be there, we should be pushing that. There's one instrument that the European Commission has at hand, and it's not using it. It's not using it, according to me, conditionality. We are candidate countries. So if you have I'll give you another example. Even with cards, even before IPA, we were supposed to establish a midterm budgeting experience because it's important today. You know, you can't plan, you cannot program the sector-wide approach because you need at least a 4-year budget. And in Macedonia, there is no such thing. This was supposed to be a responsibility of the government. In 2000, if you look at the MIP at the time, Multi-Annual Indicative Planning Program, you would see that that was there to be financed through cards. Even today, it's not there. So the Commission should have said, no, this is a condition, you're not going to get the money unless you do this. And I'll give you another even better example. We had IPA 1, okay? Within this IPA 1, we had 5 components, and you had to get the so-called accreditation so that the country needs to, you know, work, build the institutions and work with the European money because it's a way of learning how to, in the future, work with the cohesion and structural funds. Great. So what we were doing, an enormous amount of money of IPA 1 went into establishing these structures. We have about 700 or 800 people who are working within the structures so that we can have accreditation, and the accreditation happen, and we can have people working there. Now, because of the government as it is, what they're doing, they're taking people from one institution, moving into other, the capacity is bad. In the meantime, the European Commission realizes that this is not working and that we're losing the money. Just for the sake of argument, Macedonia, for the time being, has lost more than 60 million. So that's more than 10% for the time being. And until the end of the year, that loss is going to go up. So the Commission, realizing that this is a problem, you think that they're trying to solve the problem by using conditionality? No. What they're doing at the moment is that they're saying, we have a sector-wide approach. We've changed the whole system now. We're going to have sectors. But if you want to manage the sectors, you have to have midterm budgeting, which in actual fact puts us in a situation to pay 800 people on the payroll so that we have the accreditation for a system that we're not using because it's going to be centralized, they're going to use it. I mean, how does this make sense to you? So this is what I'm fighting. The things that don't make sense, just because someone doesn't want to bother. This is not even a corruption issue. It's just that people don't care.
Okay, thank you. Before the next question, I will just remind that you can ask all our speakers as well, Hrvoje, who is online still on Skype. And next question, David.
A small comment also, because I really like your approach of not thinking into stereotypes, and I think it's also important to apply it to politicians and public officials when we talk about corruption, because the first thing is always to improve the capacity of the CSOs to get corruption public in the media. But the negative side of this is that the public opinion in the society often turns into negative considerations of the political system in general. People think the whole politicians are corrupt, and it is important to capture the state of art, and maybe 80% of the politicians in one parliament might be corrupt, but still we need to give the other ones a fair chance and also give them incentives by always taking into the account that there are risks. But I think this is a second problem, how we can bring the issue of corruption more into the public, but on the other hand, don't destroy the credibility of the political system. Yeah.
Any more hands ready to have questions? Yes, Kosh.
I would very much like to hear what's your comment about how EU approaches to these offices which they have in every country and the people who work in these institutions, and how they are correlated, I mean, with the people who apply for these tenders. Because usually, how I perceive it, it's like I don't blame the people who like get advantage of the current situation, and I think why we have the current situation is because certain people and powerful people are getting rich out of this system, and they develop that thing. So now nothing changes because to change you have to like track big fishes. So how much EU is concentrated in these offices in these countries to really get people who don't have correlation with people outside and don't help them so these things can happen? What's your comment about that? Thank you.
You know, if you put this question before this government came into power, I would have said that, you know, they have the rules, they have the system, and it's very easy to be impartial if you have rules in place. But what I've seen in the last 10 years in my country is that even the people that are employed within the delegation, for example, they're so close with the leading party that I honestly don't think that the delegation has the right opinion about certain things. I'm not saying they don't know what's happening. They do know what's happening. But sometimes, again, the personal dimension, you know, it's easier to do your job if you have good relations with the government. If you don't, it's going to be very difficult. And in our country, we have examples of both. We have had ambassadors of the EU who have had excellent relations with the government, and they've had an easy life here. And we had one ambassador who cared and who spoke openly. And you really don't want to be in his shoes. He's been ridiculed on television, on publicly. I mean, you have no idea what kind of a difficult life that person had. So again, you know, I think the personal moment is here. We should be aware of that, and we should, you know, try to push certain things. But we can't expect too much. I don't think that, I don't know, I mean, I'm not clever enough. I've had, personally, I have had good relationships with all of the ambassadors. I had to cooperate with them, but I have different opinions about, you know, the people that are working. And now you can actually say, see who they are, towards who they're inclined. But if there are rules, it's easy to abide by the rules, and then, you know, you put certain things in their own position. I don't know how precise I was with these words.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Ivan, here you go.
Hello. Hello, my name is Ivan. I'm from Croatia. I have a question for Mr. Hrvoje. Can he?
Okay, we can reestablish the connection if it's...
He can hear me?
Hrvoje, are you here? Okay, we hear you. We hear you. So Ivan will ask you a question.
Okay, we talked here a lot of about abusing and using EU funds in Macedonia. But what's the situation in Croatia? Hrvoje, you talk about this Dubrovnik and Neretva County, but what about other regions in Croatia? And I think, and I know, we also have a problem with corruption. So what's your opinion? How do Croatians use EU funds, and can we use it better? Or what's your opinion about that? I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. There is a lot about corruption, less about opportunities that are offered. Corruption is the biggest problem for all the countries of Southeastern Europe and has no place in EU funds. Development, jobs and growth centrally doesn't go along with corruption. So, we all need concrete good projects. We need strong society and civil sector. Successful use of EU funds raises the question of the absorption capacity of the institutions, in this case Croatia, at the central level, and also the level of local and regional governments, also to use the EU funds that are available to them. Croatia found itself in the situation of the projects implemented from several sources. We still implement projects from pre-accession funding sources, primarily IPA funds, and there will be the new funds in the program 2014-2020. The problems were with the adoption of the development strategies, but Croatia is still on its way to use available EU funds.
Are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you hear me? I don't know.
Yes, we heard you. Thank you. Now, Ms. Dimova, our speaker, has as well a question for you.
I don't know whether you heard, but I asked, I saw your presentation and you said that amongst the other things that you're lobbying in Brussels. And knowing how policies are created in Brussels, could you be a bit more specific? What are you lobbying for? And who are you lobbying for?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
On your presentation, on the slide, you said that one of the things that you're doing in Brussels is you're lobbying in Brussels. What do you mean by lobbying?
Okay, Brussels can indeed be considered the world capital of lobbying for local and regional authorities. The activities of regional representation in Brussels are not focused only on direct lobbying and interest representation. The regional offices were set up in Brussels for a variety of different reasons. Some primarily for EU funding, others want to play a significant political role at EU level, and some regions were primarily seeking to raise the profile and connect with networks of the EU institutions. Whatever the initial motives were to come to Brussels, today the offices have converged on similar set of goals and activities, so they have become much more uniform in that they all combine a broad range of activities and all seek to inform, to network, lobby, and market for their regions. Regions with legislative powers constitute a separate category that focuses primarily on influencing policies. And given that their preferential access to the European Council of Ministers and Commission allows to do so effectively. However, the activities of the regional representation allows conversion with other office practices, and also the diversified range of functions that regional offices fulfill is one of the reasons why they are likely to be permanent here in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
And their presence is not dependent on the availability of EU funds, and the very tasks that they perform make them relevant and useful to their home regions and cities.
Yes, I understand that completely. So thank you for your answer. Have you, by the way, met anyone from the Macedonian office?
Sorry, can you again?
We apparently have an office there as well, but nobody has heard of any kind of an initiative that has come out from Macedonian office. Have you met anyone from there? Except that she's a model. We don't actually know anything what they've done. Yes, she is a model. She's previously a model.
No, I am working for the representation office of Macedonia government, and there you have maybe also the city of Skopje is also represented by them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hrvoje. I will just check if there is any more questions between the participants for you. Okay, I will thank you, Hrvoje, very, very much for this online Skype meeting with you. Thank you so much. Okay, and you got a nice applause, okay. So is there any more final question for Ms. Dimova? We have 2-3 more minutes. or you're heading to lunch immediately. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, speakers, so much. It was very interesting. Logistical information from Biljana. Thank you as well, the technicians, for a nice connection. Thank you so much.
So, two important information.